listeners. Welcome, all 14 of you, to the third of the Ocean Memory web seminar series titled Communities of Memory Exploring Networks of Humans and Microbes. Today is going to be a little bit different from the last two in that our presenters are both teams of two. Um, the way this is going to work is my co-host Kathy Foley Meyer is going to introduce the two speakers, the first two speakers, and then we'll take a very short break for a few questions. If you have questions during the talks, feel free to put them in the chat. And then we will go into our second pair of speakers, and then the rest of the time will be question and answer and discussion until 8:30 tonight.
I'm going to introduce Lisa Demore and Monique Verdun. Lisa Demore is an OB award-winning playwright and co-artistic director of Pearl d'Amour, an interdisciplinary performance company. Her plays have been performed on Broadway, Manhattan Theater Club's Samuel J. Friedman Theater, and in many other theaters, including Playwrights Horizons, Steppenwolf, The Wilma, Woolly Mammoth, and Southern Rep. Pearl d'Amour's recent works include How to Build a Forest, an 8-hour performance in which Pearl d'Amour builds a majestic fabricated forest by hand, and Lost in the Meadow, created with set designer Mimi Lien for the 40-acre meadow garden at Longwood Botanical Gardens. Lisa is a Pulitzer Prize finalist, a past winner of the Steinberg Playwright Award and the Doris Duke Performing Artist Award. She lives in New Orleans, Louisiana, and New York, New York. Monique Verdun is an interdisciplinary storyteller who documents the complex relationship between environment, culture, and climate in Southeast Louisiana. She is a citizen of the Huma Nation, director of the Land Memory Bank and Seed Exchange, and a member of the Another Gulf is Possible collaborative, working to envision just economies, vibrant communities, and sustainable ecologies. She is co-producer of the documentary My Louisiana Love, and her work has been included in a variety of environmentally inspired projects, including the multi-platform performance Cry You One, Unfathomable City, a New Orleans Atlas, and the collaborative book Return to Yakni Chito, Huma Migrations. So without further ado, Lisa Demore and Monique Verdun.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
Yeah, thanks so much. Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen and yeah, kind of ground us a little bit. Lisa Demore and I found out actually through the Ocean Memory Project that we're cousins. And it's because of Bulbancha, which is better known as New Orleans, and our ancestors finding a home in this in-between land and water place. Bulbancha means place of many languages or place of many tongues, and just love to share that Choctaw word with folks to reorient our history and time and titles and names. And so we come from this very complicated place that is also has this web of pipelines and canals, and we're losing land at one of the fastest rates in the world. Right, so we're on kind of baby land, geologically speaking, in the Mississippi River Delta, meaning that what took, Mother Nature about 5,000, 8,000 years to create, it's also taken man about 100 years to screw up to a point where the sea is reclaiming what has been land. And so I think that, this, of course, with just, the disasters of the last, couple of decades, but thinking back specifically to 2010 when there was the BP Deepwater Horizon spill, which actually lasted about 3 months in the Gulf of Mexico. So every day we would watch the weather, and they would also show you where the oil was going. So we remember that wasn't that long ago, and also there are approximately 2,000 or more active wells that are in the Gulf of Mexico right now, and in my opinion, I don't think we're any safer now than we were before. But that blowout happened on 4/20, which also coincides with the Earth Day anniversary. So Lisa and I, we knew each other through the art world. That we're on an ocean memory call during the COVID, having conversation, and Lisa said something about her ancestors, and I thought, oh, my ancestors are from Haiti too, and came from Saint Domingue at the time of the revolution. And so it's just funny to think how paths cross and ocean memory conversations continue. And so we have conceived of this idea of an ocean memory cabaret, which will premiere on April 20th of 2021. And so that's the 11-year anniversary or disasterversary of the BP Horizon spill, but wanting to bring together scientists and artists, and specifically folks who are focused on the Gulf, particularly to, talk about the wonder and the mystery of this little part of the ocean that we call home. And I'll just mention one more project that I was a part of, which Lisa and I were in the same world together there too, which is Cryuan, which premiered in 2013 and was really this immersion in my community with performing artists to take this journey and responding. At that time, it was after the BP spill, and all of the restore acts were passing through, and so we were really trying to bring together, all of this information that was important for citizens to make decisions, and also to press for policy that was for the well-being of the Gulf as a whole. So I think that this project is it was a transformative project in my life, and really led me to the Land Memory Bank and Seed Exchange work that I have continued to do. So it's funny how, we were trying to do this work out in the wetlands to tell a story about we're losing land in South Louisiana at one of the fastest rates in the world. Every hour an acre is lost from our shores. But also like what happens when you allow the nature to do what it needs to do. And being in this in between, right? In between land and water, in this estuary, in this major part of, in this major delta for the world. I always think of it as a PowerPoint for the planet. It's been really great to be connected with the Ocean Memory Project, and to dream about what is possible and bringing other folks into the community. So I'll pass it on to Lisa, and I'll stop from sharing my screen.
Yes, and so the picture that Monique just showed you of the Cryuan performance, while I wasn't involved in the creation of that work, that is my artist family. And Monique and I both really come from a tradition of community-based art. And I think we're conceiving of this Ocean Memory Cabaret as a way of creating community, and especially of a way of breaking down silos between scientists, artists, and activists. And we have used it as an opportunity to start trying to think about this Gulf node of the Ocean Memory Project. Just for another bit of context, and now I will share my screen. The cabaret is really conceived. We've said that what we want to do with this first virtual cabaret. When we applied for the seed grant to create the cabaret, we weren't sure if we were going to be able to have to do this virtually or not. Turns out we do for this first one. And we're really looking at this first one as learning what it is by doing it. So we're really intuitively inviting artists and scientists to participate in the virtual event. And really every week we start to see more and more what the event is going to look like and what it's going to be and how it's going to breathe. And I think this comes both from Monique's experience with projects like Cryuan, and when you do land-based work, land-based performance, you really have to kind of arrive at the land every day and be ready for what it's going to bring you, whether that's a storm or a flood or this or that. And the image that I'm sharing with you now is a performance that I worked on over the course of 5 years called Milton, in which my collaborator and I chose 5 small towns named Milton, in 5 different parts of the country. And you can kind of see in this image that we saw that they formed a bit of an earthbound constellation. And we spent 5 years visiting these Miltons, interviewing residents, not really knowing what we were going to do with this material. Our initial desire was simply to get out of our urban bubble and meet people who were different from us. As the project evolved, we began to write a play that was about common themes that we were seeing in all 5 of these towns. And then over the course of time, we were able to create this play and adapt it for 3 of the Miltons, the Milton in Massachusetts, in North Carolina, and in Milton Freewater, Oregon. And each time we presented the play, we also collaborated with the community on local arts events that were directly related to issues that the town was facing at the time. So for example, in the small town in Milton, North Carolina that we worked in, which was really a town of about 300 people, they really were looking for a way to bring more art, life, commerce into their small town. And we worked with them to create a street fair over the course of a weekend that showcased local artists and local food. They had art workshops for kids. And that became, after we did our show and kind of left the town, although we kept in touch with them, that became an annual event that Pearl Demore consulted with them on each year, which is of course paused now for COVID. So I think that Monique and I are just really interested in taking big leaps and seeing what things can become. So this first cabaret that we're doing will be virtual. And Monique, I thought maybe we just take them through a few of the people who are going to be involved. So I just have some different websites pulled up, and Monique, we can each chime in as we kind of go through. And I'm going to see if I can kind of move back and forth from an artist to a scientist, from an artist to a scientist. So to start, we thought, well, what is a cabaret without an MC? We need some kind of MC. And we were like, who is someone that we could invite who will kind of dream into this with us? And we invited our friend Aurora Nealand, who is a composer, jazz performer, theater performer, all-around auteur, who we have recently also found out is quite the science geek. And so Aurora will be creating a piece of her own. The pieces in our first cabaret will be about 5 to 7 minutes long, but then she'll also be creating some interstitial material, introducing some of the different speakers. And she's really a wonderful collaborator because she can kind of stay open to what's going to come at us in the next couple of weeks as we start getting people's talks and performances kind of turned into us. And so to go from Aurora to one of our own, someone who's on this call now is Dr. Mandy Joy, who is of course at the Department of Marine Sciences at the University of Georgia. And we were really interested in Mandy joining us because of her knowledge of this oil-eating bacteria that really kicked into high gear after the Deepwater Horizon spill. Monique, is there anything you wanted to mention in addition to that, or?
Yeah, no, that's, you're doing great.
Okay. Just like jump in.
Okay, all right. Yeah, microbes. It's all about the microbes, right?
And so then we were thinking about New Orleans and Gulf artists that we could invite, and also just people who were writing wondrous things about ocean life. And so we invited, we're creating an interesting collaboration between Spirit McIntyre, who is a cellist, a Reiki healer, a speaker, a performer, really wonderful performer around town. And Spirit will be choosing a piece of writing from Alexis Pauline Gumbs' book, Undrowned. Dr. Gumbs has given us her permission to use a bit of her writing, and performing that excerpt and adding in some of Spirit's creative work as well. So Spirit will be joining us along with Dr. Alex Kolker, who is part of the core team, who is helping us put together this cabaret. He works at the Louisiana University's Marine Consortium down south in Cocodrie. And Alex will be filming himself taking sediment samples from the land on which he works and talking about how the sediment holds history and helps indicate history. So he'll be giving us an even more on the ground kind of South Louisiana view. We'll also be joined by Rebecca Moise, who is a theater artist who lived in New Orleans for many years and has been developing a piece called Vessels that was supposed to be touring really right now. It was supposed to start about a year ago. And it is a dance theater performance that explores the Middle Passage. This is an image from one of their early workshops of this piece. And Rebecca will either be showing some previous video content from that performance, or maybe performing an original excerpt from it. And Rebecca was also a part of Cry-U-One, so very much a part of our theater, community theater world. Next, Monique is a part of a really wonderful, incredible collective called Another Golf is Possible. Could you just say like 2 sentences about Another Golf, and then I'll
Sure. Another Golf is a network of folks that are based from Brownsville, Texas to Pensacola, Florida, working for just transitions in all the forms that it may come. And one of our collaborators, Rebecca Hinosa, is based in Brownsville, which is also faced with multiple layers of challenges, one being liquefied natural gas terminals that are being built or have already been built. The border wall is right there with Montemoros and SpaceX. So Elon Musk and their rocket shuttle thingy is happening there. And I don't know how much you guys know, but the Gulf is a site where SpaceX is, it's like in their sites as a place where the capsules can be retrieved. And so there's a lot going on there. And we've asked Rebecca and also another collaborator of ours in the Another Gulf Circle, Patricia Rubio, to collaborate on how, SpaceX is also in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yes, great. In addition to some of these longer acts, we're going to be creating what we like to call interstitial material, shorter pieces that help link the cabaret together. And so 2 of our collaborators on this material are here with us in our Ocean Memory family, Daniel Cohn, an incredible visual artist, and Anya Yermakova, who is a scholar, musician. I don't know, she's probably an astronaut too, from what I can tell. But they have been doing some collaborations that mix sound and visuals, that kind of combine their 2 art forms. And they'll be experimenting with short pieces that they're allowing us to use probably several times in the cabaret. So we're super excited about that. And then I think this is last but not least, there's actually one other person after this. Christine DeLong, who is a professor at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge. And Christine has been studying these ancient underwater cypress forests that were discovered like 60 miles into the Gulf off the coast of Mobile, or off the coast of Orange Beach. And could you say 1 or 2 words about these forests?
Yeah, they were uncovered during Hurricane Ivan in 2004. So, these, like ice age forest. And so they've been doing core samples and right now trying to put into the federal government laws that can protect that forest. So really, honored to learn more about, old deltas, systems that are now buried in the Gulf of Mexico.
And Christine is also hoping to film herself kind of out on the water. Alex and Christine were both like, anything to get me out of the house gonna go film myself on the water. And then finally, we'll be working with a friend of Monique's named Ben Depp, who specializes in aerial photography of Gulf lands and marshes. And I think Monique is hoping to go up in the air with him.
Well, no, I can't go up in the air with him because he flies around in a paraglider, but or a paramotor thingy. But I'm hoping he'll be able to take us on a flight with him. And really, you know, I think just to close, we're really been thinking about this Ocean Memory Cabaret from the bottom to the top, and even to space. And I think that Ben's work in the marshes and wetlands of South Louisiana are this really beautiful, you know, perspective of the in-between. And so, yeah, super excited about the cabaret.
Yeah, so you can see we're really assembling it based on our intuitive feel for what could be a really interesting combinations of minds and spirits to explore this beautiful, wondrous, and complex area of the country. And we're looking forward to sharing it with you. Happy to take some questions.
It's really neat. Thanks for sharing that with us. There are no questions in the chat window. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask? I can ask a quick one, which is why did you pick for your quintessential small town name? Why Milton? How do you come up with that?
You know, it was the process was semi-random. We knew we wanted to go to a series of towns. First, we Googled most commonly named towns, and that started to narrow it down. And, you know, we're artists. And so I think we were drawn to a name that sounded like a person, that was kind of, you know, evoked the idea of a personality. And then we wondered at the beginning if possibly some aspect of like Paradise Lost, like John Milton's Paradise Lost, might come into play, which in many ways didn't. And then my collaborator had an Uncle Milton. And so it was that kind of focused and random, just to get us to choose the towns. And then we really tried to, it was based on an attempt to get a diverse range of geography, demographics, and occupations. But also out of necessity, two of the Miltons were close to where each of us were based. And so, as you can imagine, funding was stretched very thin to make this project happen. So we had to consider like travel costs as well. It was funded by a grant from the MAP Fund, the Multi-Arts Production Fund, Creative Capital. And then there's a program called NEA Our Town, which is a grant that artists apply for with cities themselves, for projects that are designed to kind of use art to make cities more livable. And two of the Miltons were funded by that project. So that group.
Then Julie Huber has a question.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi, Julie. Yes, and I didn't mention that Julie is also on our kind of
Julie hasn't done much, so now I'm asking how can we help promote it, and like, are you creating a website or a flyer or something like that we can sort of start spreading in our communities?
Yes, our goal is to have a piece of PR material, not a website, but probably a flyer that you can post places or email by April 1st.
Yeah.
Start spreading the word. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to say too, we're wanting, it's not going to be a live cabaret, but because of the way we're wanting to edit things together so that it does seem seamless, but we're going to be like having a live kind of broadcast. And then today we were just talking about having some sort of celebration or some sort of sharing after the premiere, which will again happen on for April 20th, 2021. So that, and then that we'll have it up for a little while, but it's not something we're thinking will live online. and anybody can access it on YouTube kind of version for now, just to have it be a little bit more intimate, and also in this sense of like wanting to connect with more community and having folks kind of sign up for something like a screening and what have you, so that we can stay connected with folks. And then there's also a question I see here about other formats. So one of my slides that I did show, I think right before I turned my screen off, is a project called the Float Lab that's currently in production. And so our dream is that we'll be able to have a physical Ocean Memory Cabaret in the fall, and possibly be using this piece of infrastructure. So the Float Lab can be used both on and off water, and it can be an exhibition space. It can also be a performance space. It can also be a disaster kind of just recovery space eventually, with solar plugins and what have you. So these like communities and conversations, I think, and wanting to expand those is an intention.
Yeah, and we'd love it. I see that Kathy was also asking specifically about AR and VR. And, again, I think this initial attempt, which is, virtual in part by necessity, could be a great way for everyone in the Ocean Memory community to kind of dream into where this cabaret could go. Could it be in different formats? I think it's going to be I think it's going to create a lot of wonder and be a great educational tool as well. So we'd love to maybe debrief with anyone who has the chance to come and see it about other ideas of where it could go.
Dr. Samantha Mandy Joy is a Regents Professor and holds the Athletic Association Professor in Arts and Sciences in the Department of Marine Sciences in the University of Georgia's Franklin College of Arts and Sciences. She is an expert in biogeochemistry and microbial ecology, and works in open ocean and coastal ecosystems. Her work is interdisciplinary, bridging the fields of chemistry, microbiology, and geology. Dr. Joy's research has been widely published in leading scientific journals, and she is regularly called upon by national and international scientific and policy agencies for expert commentary. Her work has been funded by substantial multi-year grants from the National Science Foundation, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Gulf of Mexico Research Institute, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, among others. Rebecca Rutzstein is a multidisciplinary artist and Pew Fellow. Rebecca Rutzstein works at the intersection of art, science, and technology. Rutzstein, whose work spans painting, sculpture, interactive installation, and public art, is passionate about creating visual experiences that shed light on the natural world, forging a dialogue about stewardship in the face of climate change. Her residencies around the globe include 2 deep sea dives in the Alvin submersible. Her collaborations have been funded by the National Science Foundation, Delta Airlines Foundation, National Academy's Tech Futures Initiative, Ocean Exploration Trust, and Schmidt Ocean Institute. Rutzstein has been featured on NPR, ABC, CBS, and in the Wall Street Journal and Huffington Post. Her work can be found in the permanent collections of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Georgia Museum of Art, Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts Museum, and Yale University. Rutzstein holds a BFA from Cornell University and an MFA from the University of Pennsylvania. Without further ado, take it away, Rebecca and Mandy.
You're muted. Thank you very much, Kathy, for that. I'm going to share my screen now. Hold on one sec. All right. Can you guys see that? Okay. It's really an honor to be speaking with this group. I cannot overstate the impact that the Ocean Memory Project has had on me and how it's expanded me intellectually, creatively, even spiritually. I've met some of the most amazing humans through this project, and I'm grateful to have been brought into the fold. Thank you, Daniel, for that, and to have Ocean Memory be part of my life. So Mandy and I met at the very first Ocean Memory workshop at Friday Harbor in 2017, September of 2017. last week at the sound workshop, Jonathan Berger was talking about meeting Tim Weaver for the first time on a bus heading to the NACV conference, and knowing within 5 minutes that he'd be working with this person for many years to come. And that was sort of how I felt when I met Mandy. There was just a synergy right away, and we felt inspired by one another, a shared excitement and passion for each other's work and vision. And the bonds I made with so many at that first workshop are really deep, and I'm grateful for those relationships and the ones I've made at the other OM workshops since, even virtually. But back at the farewell dinner in Friday Harbor in 2017, I was speaking to Mandy about my decades-long dream to dive in Alvin, and she simply said, "I'll take you." And that was the start of our multi-year collaboration. Mandy?
Thanks, Rebecca, and thanks everybody for joining us this evening. So I think Rebecca has captured many of the same feelings that I had at the Friday Harbor workshop. I mean, this is such an amazing group, and the connections and synergies between all of us just seem to continue to grow. And there's something really unique and powerful about what we're doing in this group, and I'm just thrilled and proud to be a part of it. When I met Rebecca pretty early on in the workshop, and I remember there was a break, and I was checking my email because I had some silly deadline like all of us have all the time, and I was looking at a cartoon that Jim Tinney had sent me a draft of, and Rebecca sort of peeked over my shoulder and saw the cartoon, and we started talking about art and various other things. And then ultimately, I offered to bring her on the Alvin. I don't know if she believed me at the time, but, we ended up, doing an Alvin dive, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But it's fair to say that this group and this program has really changed the way that I think about a lot of things, both scientifically and in terms of the role of art and humanities in leveraging and promoting science in our society. But we'll tell you a little bit about the experiences we've had at sea, and what's coming up next in 2022.
So we got back from the workshop, and Mandy officially invited me to join her for her fall 2018 Guaymas Basin cruise in Mexico. So there was about a year in between. I spent that year planning, visiting Mandy in Georgia, where she's a professor, and doing research to understand the chemical and microbial processes that are occurring at Guaymas, and that Mandy and other scientists have been exploring for years. And so I became fascinated to learn that the Guaymas Basin is essentially a lens to look through time. It's where ancient hydrothermal processes can be seen anew in a nascent spreading sea. And it really linked so tangibly to ocean memory in that respect, and to the root of our meeting and doing this collaboration. So Mandy and I went back and forth in a truly collaborative way over that year, as I shared visual ideas with her in person and digitally. And we sort of developed the work in tandem. It was not just me creating work in a vacuum, responding to the science. It was really us creating sparks of ideas together that could be explored further. And I love that the nature of our collaboration was aligning very much with the interdisciplinary nature of the Ocean Memory Project itself, which was formed through really a joint interdisciplinary inquiry between artists and scientists. So basically, at that point, the Wilson Center for Humanities at the University of Georgia, where Mandy was teaching, was interested in our developing collaboration. And so the following fall of 2018, UGA would be hosting the A2RU conference, which is a conference of 50 research universities that would be convening to talk about art, sustainability, and the environment. And so they wanted Mandy and I to be part of it. So I was invited to be the 2018 to 19 Delta Visiting Chair for Global Understanding at University of Georgia, with an exhibition at the Georgia Museum of Art and a plenary lecture that Mandy and I would take part in at the conference. And so the conference was actually being held in the beginning of November 2018, just before we set sail for Guaymas. And so we'll share more about that later, but first we'll talk about the cruise.
So this is a map of the Gulf of California for those of you who are unfamiliar. You've probably read John Steinbeck's book, many of you, The Sea of Cortez. Many of you may have seen some of the footage from Jacques Cousteau describing the Sea of Cortez as one of the most magical, mysterious places that he ever visited in his career. It is truly an amazing place where hydrothermalism interacts with sediments. Usually hydrothermal fluids are discharged through hard rock, basalts, ultramafic rocks. In the Gulf of California, there's a sediment layer through which these fluids perfuse, and it essentially makes a very different kind of hydrothermal fluid cocktail compared to what you see at other parts of the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean or the Indian Ocean. There's a lot of inorganic energy for microbial communities, but there's also a lot of organic compounds available to microbial communities. So what we've been doing there is looking at some of the fundamental processes at the base of the microbial food web related to methane cycling and the cycling of low molecular weight organics. You can flip the slides anytime, Rebecca, because I'm just going to keep talking. When Rebecca and I were at sea together, it was a very different experience. I mean, I've sailed with artists before, but there was something very different about Rebecca and I being on the ship at the same time. And it wasn't just because our workstations were side by side. So we saw each other all the time. But it was a true experience of seeing things through her eyes and talking with her about every aspect of what we were doing so that she could capture it in the art that she was creating. The other thing that I noticed that was even more pronounced than cruises on the Falkor was that everybody on the ship's crew was coming through the lab talking to Rebecca almost once a day. I mean, the entire ship's crew would wander through there and look at the paintings and talk to her about what she's doing and what she's seeing. And it was really remarkable to see how engaged everybody on the vessel was with what she was doing and what she was creating. I remember she was having a lighting problem, and one of the engineers like whipped up a lighting system for her in the drop of a hat. But everybody really enjoyed interacting with her and working with her and taking a different view of the science that we were doing on board.
I think there's just like a really good energy on the ship where everybody's kind of feeding off of each other. I mean, it's a crazy cycle of kind of, there's always somebody up doing something. There's at night, you're deploying CDDs. Basically, at any time somebody's busy. When Alvin comes up, all of a sudden you have to then sort through all the samples. Then you have to. There's always something going on, and so essentially, there was an excitement and sort of a feeding off of one another in all of it that was really unique and special, and sort of a collective desire to inquire and understand and discover. And so it was exciting to not only have the science team, but the crew, everybody would be sort of engaging. And so it was really special.
And this is we had a lot of stuff that we were doing on this cruise for the first time, not the least of which were these monstrous, their size is not really captured in the image, but these are what we call the jumbo osmo samplers. Many of you have used osmo samplers in your work. They're basically osmotic pumps that allow you to capture fluids at in situ pressure at the bottom of the ocean. These are super fast osmo pumps that allow us to get about a 15 mil fluid sample in a 36-hour deployment. That may not sound like a lot, but that's really an amazing thing, and they worked really, really well. So we deployed them off of what's called this elevator, which is shown on the left-hand image there. We positioned them with the Alvin, and we picked them up, a couple of days later, and we had a profile of in situ fluid chemistry from the surface down to about 20 centimeters. We have 4 of these pumps that collect a depth profile every 5 centimeters from the surface down to 20 centimeters. So it was pretty exciting for one of the students because he spent a long time building this, and then it worked. So then Rebecca and I took Rebecca to one of my favorite places in Guaymas. It's oddly enough called Rebecca's Roost. For her, it was already named that, But it's this just magnificent hydrothermal edifice that's covered in tube worms and octopus. There's lots of octopus. And, you know, it wasn't Rebecca's first dive in the Alvin. That was with Eric Cortez off Costa Rica. But I think it was, I don't know, is it fair to say that it was cooler than Costa Rica? I think it was probably cooler than Costa Rica. Rebecca, I'll let you.
It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. I mean, both dives were incredible because it was such a, you know, amazing opportunity to have. But yeah, no, it was nothing like what I saw in Costa Rica. It was incredible.
So Guaymas is a place where, this is one of Rebecca's pieces. Guaymas is a place where at the seabed, you've got a combination of mineral edifices. So these spectacular hydrothermal chimneys covered in tube worms with octopus, but you've also got these little meter high to 3 meter high. This is a chimney covered with riftia and mats of orange and white Veggiatoa, which are sulfur oxidizing bacteria. But you've also got these smaller chimneys. These are the small, on the right hand side is a big mineral chimney. And then there are these smaller chimneys that are a couple of meters tall, but these are all organic. These are like the microbial reefs in the bottom of the Black Sea. It's microbial biomass and oil. When we sample those chimneys, it's like an oil well blowout. It just blows oil up into the water column. Guaymas Basin is one of the, this is what they look like. They're spectacularly interesting. And we were able to sample them for the first time on this cruise. But Guaymas Basin is the only known place on Earth where oil is formed through hydrothermal processes. So there's modern day formation of petroleum. It's very different from the oil in the Gulf of Mexico. It's much more sulfur rich. But it has the same, class distribution of compounds, but it's forming in real time through thermocatalytic processes. So these are some of the pictures that we took with a high resolution camera in the microbial mats around Guaymas. These are white, orange, and yellow Veggiatoa. So you have discharge points in the middle of that field, and then essentially the microbial population settles where the temperature range allows different organisms to settle. And if you look closely at these images, you can see that these bacteria are actually geoengineers. They're essentially forming physical structures that accelerate and moderate the flow regime through these structures. So they make these sort of veiled architecture that helps promote oxygen flow through the system. They're aerobic heterotrophs for the most part. They can also respire nitrogen, but when they've got gaps in the veil and lots of holes in the veil, they're usually trying to pump oxygen through the system.
Yeah, I was really fascinated by these sort of open structures and the way they sort of create these habitats for other organisms. And I sort of played with these open structures in some of the paintings that I did later. These Veggiatoa mats were just incredible. They were just these really colorful, just areas that were covering the sediment, and basically part of this entire chemosynthetic ecosystem that is thriving down there. And what's so fascinating about this place is that it's this extreme environment. It's just like a kind of a hostile environment, and yet it's thriving with life down there. And so this is actually us working with temperature probes and then push cores to get samples of the Veggiatoa mats and at different temperatures. And I wanted to share also that we were also working with an AUV, the Sentry AUV, which is an autonomous underwater vehicle that was taking photomosaics of these mats. And so I was sort of working with paintings that were working with these tiled kind of photomosaics. Mandy, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so one of the most important jobs in the submarine is to make maps of the mats as we're sampling them. So we take photographs from inside the vehicle, and then we draw these. I'm not very artistic, as you can see. This might be one of Rebecca's maps because this looks way too nice to be one of my maps. But we make notes and sketches so that we can backtrack which samples need to be paired for various analyses. We had 5 scientific groups on this cruise, so we were trying to collect groups of 5 paired cores for each of the groups on every dive.
And I just wanted to just back up and just say what an incredible experience it was to actually be in the submersible and descending the water column. And I've talked about this a little bit in some of the ocean memory calls, but it was like a truly kind of spiritual experience to kind of be going down the water column and seeing all the bioluminescent life around me. I mean, it was just all I could see through the porthole for a very long time, almost the entire way. And it was a life-changing experience and something I wanted to create or sort of convey in an art piece, which I'll show you later. So, but from those push cores, after we got back up on deck, you know, all the samples would be there, and then we would pull them out and be able to kind of look at them right under the microscope. And so this is like a core from one of the Veggietoa mats, and you can see the open structures they create on those mats that we saw in those photographs, but they also kind of organize into these filaments and so, as well. So I was really interested in that and sort of was working with some paintings, working with forms from that just on the ship. And then Mandy, I was going to roll into the exhibition.
Sure.
Did you want to add anything else?
Oh, we're good. Yeah.
So then we get back to, so this exhibition took place over a year, from right before we left to sea, and then we added works that I created from the ship into the exhibition. But basically, it was an opportunity to sort of share what was happening with all of Mandy's research with the larger community, and really engage people in a way and connect them with a place they'll probably never see. And so this is part of a 22-foot tall painting that is inspired by these open structures of the Veggietoa, and also looking at the filaments, the filament forms. So this painting together is about 22 feet tall by 9 feet wide, and was also working with multi-beam sonar data, which is the third painting down of the area that we were in. And so this took place in, as I mentioned, the Georgia Museum of Art, alongside this installation I did called Shimmer. Shimmer was the first time I actually created something interactive, and it was a really exciting kind of shift for me, and sort of the way I kind of want to move in terms of the direction of my work. But I was working with LED lights that I programmed with video footage of siphonophore, which is one of the organisms that we saw prevalence of when we were in Guaymas and descending the water column. And so I actually worked with video footage of what the siphonophore does is it's a gelatinous organism with a lot of tentacles that react to predators. And when they approach, many different lights, trails of light occur at once to sort of confuse the predator. And sometimes tentacles will even detach to create almost like a firework of light, which was incredible to see in person. And so this piece created that simulation with motion sensors on either end of the piece. So when you would walk by the piece, before you would walk by it, it would just be sort of this shimmering light, which is what we were seeing down at Guaymas. There's almost like this shimmer of water from the heat that's coming up and rising from the hydrothermal vents. And so when you would just sort of approach the piece, it would just be sort of this shimmering light. And then when you would move by it, it would create this disturbance in the piece that I'll show you right now. But there were a couple of different programs set, so it wasn't necessarily, you didn't know exactly what you would see when you would walk by it. But I really like the interactive component of the piece, and sort of really engaging people on a visual level, but then having them learn something about this hidden environment and this fragile environment, and a place where, as I mentioned before, history, ocean memory is really quite prevalent in terms of, and Mandy, you can speak to this too, but just in terms of, again, you have this spreading boundary where, sorry, you don't need to see that again, but you have this spreading boundary where two plates are separating, and then you have these land masses really close together that are dropping sediment down and creating this really unique environment that Mandy described. And I was just really fascinated by this idea of seeing these very ancient processes, you know, the way early Earth was probably functioning in the present. So, Mandy, do you want to take over?
Sure. So I know we're almost out of time, but I wanted to just sort of talk for a minute about the power of the art science interface. You know, when we spoke at the conference, it was amazing how many questions we got, how just fascinated people were with the topic. And we've given a couple of other public presentations there, mediated by our good friend Nicholas Allen. And then Rebecca gave a talk at All Hands on Deck, and this is when Rebecca came back, and we did another talk in the museum. Rebecca also spent a lot of time with art students, and that has sort of grown into a formal partnership that I have now with the art school to take undergraduate art students out with us whenever we're in the Gulf of Mexico, and the director of the School of Art and I teach a class to undergraduates. We start that next fall about, you know, the STEAM interface and the role of visual arts in promoting science literacy with respect to the ocean. So I feel like we've done some really amazing things so far, but we're not done yet, and we're going to go back to Guaymas in 2022, and we've got the Blue Dreams program, which Rebecca is going to tell you about real quick.
Are we out of time yet?
We have like a minute left, I think.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it was very special kind of engaging with so many people in the community in Georgia, and just really feeling, you know, trying to create this connection through the art, and to get people to, you know, have just a deeper connection to a place that they don't know about, and to create that kind of awareness and foster a sense of stewardship. But in terms of this next project, really quick, Blue Dreams is a project that we were funded a Sea Grant for from the last Cognition and Genomics workshop. It's a project for a proposal we conceived of that will be a monumental video projection that we're also working on with Rika Anderson and Tom Scarlett. And it's going to attempt to portray the sheer magnitude of marine microbial networks and the role they play in ocean memory and mediating complex processes in the deep sea, on our planet and beyond. And so our vision would be for this projection to illuminate the facade of a building on a monumental scale, and to be highly visible. And through moving images, animated networks, potentially working with LED lights using audience interactive programming such as Particle Swarm, we're hoping to kind of create a compelling piece that generates a feeling of awe and interconnectedness with the ocean, with the smallest units, you know, the smallest networks to the biggest networks. Yeah.
And finally, we will be going back to the Gulf of California next May. And I'm really excited about this expedition. We're going to be sampling sediments as well as the water column, doing a lot of work around these just phenomenal structures, such as this edifice shown here. And this is from the western part of the Guaymas Basin. Rebecca will be going out with us, as will the BBC, to do some filming for Planet Earth 3 Oceans. And we have two really amazing science writers who are coming out with us too. Susan Casey, who some of you might know, she's written a number of books. Voices in the Ocean and The Devil's Teeth are my favorites. And Lori Garrett, who has been in the news a lot talking about COVID. But Lori's writing a book on signaling, microbial signaling and microbes in the ocean as sentinels of change. So they're both going to be coming out with us on this expedition too. So I feel like we have an opportunity not just to do some really amazing transformative science, but to share that science in a way that is going to make a local, regional, global, international impact. So happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Thank you.
And Mandy, I was reading, we're going to go back to Georgia. I'll be going back to Georgia after the cruise to sort of to speak with you and engage with the community. I mean, that was sort of just an amazing, sorry, I can stop screen sharing. Just an amazing part for me was just engaging with people of all ages, you know, and that's been sort of the nicest part of all of this in a way.
So Lisa asked who the first writer was. Susan Casey is her name. She's based, well, she lives part of the time in Hawaii, on Maui, but she lives part of the time in New York. She's actually Canadian. But she's an amazing writer. She's also writing a book about the deep ocean. And I don't know if the cruise will be part of her book. It's sort of running behind, but it might not be, but she's gonna write a piece for Rolling Stone and something for Outside about the cruise.
I just also want to mention that it was very gratifying. I feel so fortunate to have been able to work with Mandy and have this opportunity. And in creating the piece for the museum, it was supposed to be up for a year, the interactive piece. And the museum had such a great response. They had so many people that wanted the piece there, that they're keeping it, which is great. And they've just had so many students respond to it and feel a connection to the, you know, to this place. So that is like gratifying for me, to create a piece that that resonates beyond aesthetics, you know, that's it's something I've thought a lot about in this group. I know I've talked to Chris and Lee and I have talked a lot about this idea of creating something that's, you know, that it has an aesthetic value, but that really has a deeper story and purpose. And so I think since I've been collaborating with scientists, you know, and a lot having to do with the Ocean Memory Project as well, is I just really feeling a greater purpose in what I'm doing, beyond just my own personal artistic endeavors. And so it's just been really gratifying to work with all the people in this group. And I think I see a question here that, did we have any notion of each other's work before Friday Harbor? No, I was completely blind.
But I think we could have potentially met eventually because we actually have a really good friend in common in Eric Cordes.
Oh yeah.
So we could have, we did not know each other, but we may have eventually wandered into each other because
we were right on the cusp of meeting each other.
Yeah,
probably.
we were and sort of pushed us into each other. And I don't think Rebecca will say this, but I just want to make note that her exhibition in the Georgia Museum of Art was one of the most popular that they have had. And the last I checked in with them, which was probably 6 months ago, over 200,000 people have seen it, which is really remarkable for a, you know, university museum in a small town in Georgia. And I think of that, it's like 20,000 kids from all over the state, which is just, you know, it's phenomenal.
And they did a really good job of creating a lot of programming. And of course, the Wilson Center that hosted me as the chair, they did incredible programming with having me meet with people not even at the university, but just people in the community. So it just felt good to sort of, you know, I'd love to do more of that, you know, with you. And yeah, so thank you.
A question about just the Gulf of Mexico in general. You know, we're coming up on the 11th anniversary of Deepwater. And, you know, this time of year, I always think a lot about the Gulf system. How are the native populations, the Indian communities in the Bird Spit Delta recovering from, are they getting any kind of support from the penalty money from the restore funds? Is any money flowing into those communities? Because they suffered so much during that oil spill, and they suffered in a lot of silence. I mean, people who I remember going down and visiting the Huma Nation and some of these, I mean, that impacted me by a lot. And I wonder what has happened in the last 5 years or so for these populations.
Yeah, it's been kind of rough. I think that the seafood populations have rebounded, but there's been some enforcement, like the crab. There are now regulations on like you can't pull female crabs out at a certain time of year. So because there was this like collapse a little that happened right after, there has been these new regulations that have helped. But to be really honest, it's like BP came in, they threw a bunch of money around to people. They made them sign, contracts saying that they would never pursue litigation or say anything against it. I think that the biggest impacts would be from these Restore Act dollars, where there's a percentage that's going back to the Gulf states, and in regards to Louisiana, they're using those dollars to put in these major freshwater and sediment diversions to reconnect the river to the wetlands, which is a big, like, huge controversial question mark. And so you have these fishermen again that are like, oh, that's my oyster ground. I'm not going to be able to oyster there. But then also folks in other areas where it's like, oh, well, maybe we might be in the sweet spot now. But I think that those big, in quotation mark, restoration efforts are kind of the biggest impacts. But people on the ground, not so much. I mean, a lot of people got paid money in the short term, but the long term, yeah, folks are still losing their land and up against the same threat. I mean, it could happen tomorrow,
Tomorrow, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add. Monique is much more of the expert in that area than I am. So thank you, Monique.
I have a question or comment. In thinking about the Gulf of Mexico and how impactful the whole oil scene has been there on humanity, not to mention the ecosystem. Then you have the contrast in the Gulf of Mexico, where you also have oil production on the seafloor through natural processes, which also happen in the Gulf of Mexico too. But I'm not aware of impacts of seafloor activities in the Gulf of Mexico on the surrounding population. Am I just ignorant of that?
So there's no active oil production in the Gulf of California because the sediments are essentially oil saturated, but there's no reservoir. There's no reservoir capacity. So you've essentially got, a 300 or 400 meter thick lens of sediment that's a sponge saturated with oil. But if there was a way to produce that material, they would do it, but there's just not, thankfully, because I think it would be catastrophic for a system like that. One of the things that we did that I didn't mention is that the entire length of the Gulf of California from Pescadero Basin to the headwaters of the system is hypoxic. And I did not know that, 12 years ago when I started working there. And I remember the first CTD cast, I thought the oxygen meter was broken. But it's oxygenated in the top 200 meters or so. There, by 300, it goes anoxic. There's a 700 meter thick anoxic zone, and then it cranks back up to about 20 micromolar. So it's a fascinating contrast to other hydrothermal systems. You get this injection of all this material into hypoxic water. So it creates, for me, it is a real interesting analog for earlier oceans when they were beginning to be oxygenated and still loaded with reduced metabolites, because this is the place where you can really discover some novel organisms. It is also a place where a lot of really sophisticated bioinformatics techniques fall apart because there's so much diversity in the microbial community, because there's so much energy in the system.
I'm thinking about, from an ocean memory perspective, that in the Gulf of Mexico, so many established memories are now disrupted or destroyed or lost, and people are having to make new memories left and right. Yeah. Whereas in the Gulf of California, the ocean memories, if you will, are still pristine, if we can talk about it that way. And so from a memory perspective, it's pretty interesting to make the comparison between the
Yeah.
two gulfs. So I really appreciate the contrast between what you've presented today. Thank you.
Patrick had a question, but maybe also technical problems.
You're
No,
muted,
can't hear
Patrick.
you. Well, in the meantime, Daniel, do you want to ask your question or should I ask it?
I'm just curious what, since part of this project is about synergies, I'm just curious about the two projects that you presented today and what the overlaps might be or the ways in which you can, there may be avenues for working together or not.
It sounds like Mandy is already part of your cabaret, so that's kind of nice.
I think that's step one for sure of overlap. But again, I think it'll be great for Monique and I to continue to follow your project. I'm really excited to see what kind of writing comes out of it. And I just love to hear from the two of you once we premiere this on April 20th, like what comes up for you, and do you see overlap once you see the kind of thing we've put together, what emerges? So
I think there's going to be a lot of synergy.
I can't wait to see it. It sounds like you have a really eclectic group. It's going to be great.
yeah, I think it's going to be, we understand how some of the pieces resonate with each other and others are a little kind of wait and see what emerges. And we met with Aurora, the MC, today, and our plan is we kind of have a window where we're asking people to get their videos in, and then we'll look at them all with Aurora and start to see where they might be placed in the evening and how they might be tied together. So yeah, it's gonna be great to see how it all comes together.
We'll have to have a post recap.
Okay, well, it's 8:40, and we are we're officially 10 minutes over. Patrick says he gives up, and just to let you know they are all awesome. Thank you everybody for those very interesting presentations. Thanks for the attendees for attending and for asking great questions. We can keep this window open for the next 10 minutes or so if people want to stick around and chat, but otherwise we are officially over. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.